What's up, everybody? We're back in the E46 M3 that you saw, and as I mentioned at the end of that video and at the end of the E39 video, we're going to be doing a little head-to-head this week. So if you remember watching my review of this car, if you haven't, link is definitely below, and the link to the review over on Drive Tribe down below. Now, I describe this car as a scalpel, and that's really what it is. This car is pointed, it's precise, and it just carves up anything you need it to. The sort of person who wants this car is definitely the sort that just plans to spend weekends canyon carving and possibly even tracking a lot. That's the buyer for this car. So if that's what you're looking for, don't look any further. Now, benefits to this car over the M5. Well, this one does have that incredible straight 6 S54 motor, and those can hold a ton of power if you want to mod your car. It does sound very good. This particular one has squeaky brakes because race car. These do have an excellent manual transmission, but I can't really give it that over the M5 because that also has the manual and does not have SMG as an option. Other things this car has over the M5, the steering is very precise in both, but I have to give it to this car. This one definitely has the revier engine, and this one definitely feels a lot more planted. Now, both cars that I'm driving today have right about 200,000 miles. They are both 6-speed cars, and as they sit today, both cars the owners are into for about $20,000. This one has had some preventative maintenance done. It has that exhaust that sounds so good. It has a light tune. It has this Alcantara steering wheel, which personally, not my thing, but it looks very good, and I can definitely see why someone would quite like it. And for about $20,000, both of these cars are quite amazing. So what I'm going to do now is show you some B-roll, and then I'm going to jump in the M5, talk a little bit about that. Then after that, we'll have a little conversation about which one I personally would choose. We've talked a little bit about the M3, so now let's talk a little bit about this M5. Again, as I started with the M3, I'm going to jump back with the M5 to my previous review, which is obviously linked below. This car is a sledgehammer. The M3 is a scalpel that's very precise, blah blah blah, we just talked about it. This car, on the other hand, it's a mountain of power that you just hit it harder until it works. And that's the solution to just about anything in this car. Downside of that, as I mentioned in the individual review, this car isn't as good through corners as the M3, but down here in a normal circumstance, just driving around on a road, this one is much more comfortable. These seats aren't killing me, even though they weren't holding me as well. The suspension, again, this could be a setup thing rather than a specific example thing. But this one is definitely more comfortable to live with. So I would definitely recommend this one as a daily driver and fun car rather than a pure fun car when you can have a separate daily driver. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this car also is roughly about $20,000 as it sits for the owner. This car does have the updated head unit, it's got the exhaust, it's got some preventative maintenance done in the same way the M3 does. So they are roughly the same price. They're both desirable 6-speed manual M cars. Personally, I like the sound of this engine more, but I think the M3 is certainly a revier, more fun motor, but you know, being an American and having that affinity for American muscle cars that I have from growing up here, I do love the sound of an angry V8. So honestly, I think that's a personal preference thing. You know, being an American, I love a big V8. So as much as I would love to just say V8, V8, that S54 straight six is really tempting. So honestly, it's hard for me to choose. The only thing I would say is the S54 is a little easier to build on, but if you're just doing like exhaust, tune, that sort of thing, you'll be fine with this V8. And just to bring it back to a final sort of statement on which car this is versus which car the M3 is. This is an Autobahn cruise missile, while the M3 is very much a scalpel slicing through the canyons. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, we've sort of talked a bit about each car. I'll just jump very quickly through what I prefer in this car. Like I mentioned, I prefer the comfort of this car. I prefer the sound of this car. I gotta be honest, that M3 does sound good, but you can't beat a rumbling, growling V8. And actually, I do love the styling just that little bit more here on these M5s. And only because it's even more subtle. You know, both of the cars that I'm driving have a few little cosmetic touches on them. But in general, especially if you get the E39 in black or dark blue, it just flies so well under the radar that, you know, when you line up against a Mustang or a Camaro or something else, they have no idea what just hit them. So I'm going to step out of this car as I'm pulling up here, and then I will tell you which one I personally would have. So let's roll a little more B-roll. So which one would I actually buy? Taking a look first at purpose, the M3 is an amazing weekend car. Yes, it's noisy, yes, it's a bit rough, but it is just so much fun to hurl through the canyons. The M5, by comparison, is almost subtle and not quite quiet, but it is comfortable enough that you could actually daily drive it. Then there's the question of values. The M3 is going to go up in value, no question, especially if it's a 3-pedal manual like this car. But it fills a market segment that's also handled by the 911 and other manual sports coupes from that era. The M5, on the other hand, here in America at least, only really was competing with the Cadillac CTS-V being a 3-pedal V8 performance sedan. And frankly, that Cadillac is not really standing up to the test of time. And finally, it also is a question of value. How many people can reasonably afford to have both a daily car and a weekend car? So we have to consider which car is better at doing both. And while the M3 is a better canyon car, it simply can't match the M5 as a daily car, while the M5 can actually hold its own in the canyons despite its larger size. And for that reason, I have to conclude that the winner of this little head-to-head is the E39 M5. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more to come.